The following podcast may contain discussion of domestic and/or sexual violence, stalking, suicide, and PTSD. There is also the possibility of strong language that may be inappropriate for young listeners.
Hi, this is Connie Huffman with Highlands Help for Abused Spouses podcast, Breaking the Silence.
If you or someone you know needs help, you can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. If you are in the North Central Montana area, please call Highlines Help at 406-278-3342.
The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Views and opinions expressed by guest speakers are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the view of Highlines Help for Abused Spouses or any of its funders, employees, or board members.
Today I have with me Pastor Eric Munson, who is a project partner with our One Rural Grant. And through the grant, we were able to get a faith-based counselor to offer up to our clients that might need that. And so I would like now to introduce you to Pastor Eric. And could you just tell us a little bit of background on yourself?
Yes. I grew up in eastern Washington, in rural Washington dairy country, and grew up working on farms and in orchards, and started pastoring full-time around 19, at 19, and then after I finished up Bible college at 23, and met my wife in 2000, and we got married 51 weeks later, and right before 9/11, and then ended up moving to Montana in 05, where we met you, and were introduced to you, and you, of course, you know my wife, and
Yes,
and she serves as one of the advocates here, as well as office manager. I think, is that her title still?
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
And so I have been around Highlands Help for Abused Spouses for going on 19 years, 20, yeah, something like that. It has been amazing, and it's been quite an interesting education along the way, being the youngest of three boys. And growing up in a family where I say my parents loved one another, met and married in 3 months' time, but they fought like cats and dogs until I moved out of the house and went to college, and then they became friends. And the last 26, 27 years of their marriage has actually now they're 30 years of marriage have been they've been friends and are in the area, and it's pretty amazing to see. So that's a little bit about me.
So how long have you actually been pastoring?
This fall is my 31st year.
Oh.
And I'm only 50, so.
How many churches in the length of time have you been at?
I have been at, doing the numbers in my head, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. One in college, one after my wife and I got married for 3 years. We were the associate and junior high youth pastors, and then we moved to Montana. We were in Chester, and then from there we went to Whitefish, and after Whitefish we ended up back in Washington, where we adopted 2 boys and pastored a church there outside of a denominational setting, and then moved back here to Montana in January of 2021 during COVID. Have been here since, and no plans to move on from
No,
here.
that's good. I'm glad to hear that. When did you become aware of domestic violence, and when were you ever around it?
Yeah, there's a couple of things, just thinking about this interview and just talking about going forward with this. I think it was about 8 years old. I grew up in a like I said, a rural town. They would have their sunshine days, which would be about the first week of September, and they'd shut down the main street, and there'd be fairs, booths, rides, and things. And I remember being a young man and watching like again, 8 years old, watching a guy in a cowboy hat yanking his girlfriend or wife with her. She's like, "Stop, let go of me, you're hurting me," and him just yanking her through the crowd, and no one saying anything. And that kind of thing sticks with you, because as a boy, I knew it was wrong. I'd never seen my dad do that. My dad said he would never do that to my mom, and yet being kind of helpless to do anything about it. And it's always stuck in me that 42 years later, that still plays in my head. And then there are other things that came up. We had a gentleman who worked on our house, building an extension on my parents' home, and then come to find out his wife left him, and just so shocked. And I thought something was wrong with her. And then to come to find out he was physically abusive and verbally abusive to her. And I would never have guessed it. He was the nicest guy on the outside. And so it's things like that begin to shape your cynicism of people. And then you get into college and you wonder about relationships in college, and you watch this fascination from high school and college that girls seem to have with the bad boys, and it's just interesting because there's not a lot that you feel like you can do. And in fact, I would say it wasn't until we got here, and it'd be about, I think it was 30 or 29 when we moved here to Montana, and not feeling like I had anything I could offer or could do, because who am I to say anything? I've never been around it. I've never been exposed to it. What do I know? But it's the exact opposite as you come to learn and find out that it is everybody's opportunity to speak up when they see it, when they experience it.
Have you ever witnessed somebody actually step in, or would you step in as an adult if you saw it happening? Do you think you would? Yeah, in fact, I have. Without trying to name people or anything, there's been a couple of altercations where it was abusive. There was just nasty talk from a husband, and had to step in and go, "Man, come on, we don't talk about our wives that way." And then later to take them aside and just talk with them and find out what's going on, and say, is this one-time thing, or is this something that's happening? You get that fight or flight, that adrenaline rush going through you. What am I stepping into the wrong thing? Am I doing the right thing? And then there are other times when you find out that I can think of something about 18 years ago, that man keeping his wife from town here in rural Montana, and just separating her from everybody and dominating and being demonstrable. In other words, domineering her, but also threatening her. "I'm the man, do what I say." And her finally leaving in that, and even with children, and covering her. I remember as a pastor going, "What do you need? What is it?" And then when he shows up to church, we have men sit with him. He's not going anywhere near her. Yeah. And they run buffer on that, and I'm glad for those men that would do that. And then there are other things where you see it's not necessarily the physical, it's the mental. It's the abuse that happens. Now, I've seen it go both ways, and as we get in this new millennia, it seems like there's equal opportunity for mental abuse both ways. But mainly, I've seen it in men, and watching other good men and good women step up and comfort and protect keeps you from giving into cynicism, and gives you some encouragement that when somebody else is going to go through that, you can offer them, because you've already seen it, offer them limited protection that you can, and help and resources.
So, and I've known you for 20 years, so I've had a great resource in that, and Shauna will bring me back information, and that's been a huge help.
When you first started, or when Shauna first started here, and it was basically with office financial management and stuff like that, but we all have to wear more than one hat, where, she still had to
be trained as an advocate. And so how did that, if any, affect you when she comes home and says, yeah, but I have to do this other stuff besides bookkeeping? Were you concerned? Yes. At first it was just a sounding board because I wasn't sure what all it was getting into. And living in a non-threatening environment, I mean, I always was told that you got to treat your wife well. Why? Because she knows where you sleep. And this mutual respect and love isn't something that most people understand or have been taught. And so it was hearing some of the things she was able to share, and to some extent what she was not able to talk about, that sometimes you can communicate without talking about it, you know what I mean? Or you can just say, oh my gosh, I can't believe it could be worse than that. She just kind of roll her eyes, and that's about all she could do. She couldn't she couldn't talk about it. And then to watch, and what you guys do, especially those that first do it, it's painful, because it's like watching one of your kids fall off their bike and scrape their knee, but you still don't take the bike away from them. They have to get back up and go. It's like getting bucked off the horse. You get back on it. It's like dealing with something difficult. And so some of the things that she had to deal with, and some of the people and cases she had to walk through things with, it was hard to not want to protect.
Correct. Yeah.
Ask to go with her. Ask to have permission to hear more so that you could give more understanding or empathy, and trust your wife on this. And at the same time, when there needed to be an outlet, help provide an outlet, whether it be us go hiking or going and doing something, or just going for a drive and talking about stuff. Those were interesting days.
Yeah.
It was interesting days because my wife grew up in a pastor's home. She didn't grow up seeing that kind of thing. And she knew it happened, like we all hear about on the news or this or that. But to experience it firsthand, to sit down with somebody, to see the ugly side of it, which is not just the abuse, but what a victim goes through, the self-doubt, the self-destructive behavior. The number one stat was, and I don't know if this is still the stat, but it takes 7 times of trying to leave before a person will actually leave an abusive relationship. And I guess that's a long-term abusive relationship.
Yeah, those are stats. They change every once in a while. Why? It depends on where you look, but that's basically 7 times before they actually will leave that situation.
And so if you do the stat thing, that means that for every person that leaves on the 3rd try, there's somebody that stays until the 11th.
Yeah. Some never leave.
Yeah, and I chuckle there because it's more of a nervous chuckle of, oh my goodness, now being a father with older young women, daughters and 3 boys, and you want to wrap your kids up and number one, teach your boys how to be men with their future spouses, and number 2, teach your daughters how to spot questionable issues and not romanticize over or he'll change.
Yeah, and that's really hard to get across to young women, but even some older ones that the saying "love is blind" is very true.
Yeah.
It is super blind.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we have these TikToks, these reels, these clips you can watch now. And one of them said, for all those women out there who are afraid their man's going to leave them, he's ordered the same sandwich since he was 9. He's not going to get tired of you, But also, you got to apply that to the negative side. He's, if that's the way he's been, or that's the way he's been raised, that's going to be his tendency. And now I've seen people get radically changed. That's part of my hope as a pastor, is to watch God work in their lives. At the same time, though, the character that we're raised up to be is the hardest thing to get rid of. We naturally recreate the relationships that we're familiar with, even if they're nasty, ugly, and abusive. And so people will recreate unconscious or subconsciously their relationship. They will pick a fight because that's what mom used to do, or that's what dad used to do. They couldn't go without a certain amount of trauma. And that was something, like I jokingly said, my parents fought because they met and married in 3 months' time. But the year I went to college, something happened and they became friends. And that was the beginning of the next 31 years, of their marriages. They still are going strong. In fact, they'll be celebrating their 55th here in a few days. So
congratulations to them.
Yeah. But again, there were even times in my wife and I, when we're talking about some of these things that happen within these abusive relationships, that if you got to be honest and look at yourself and go, there's been times that it hasn't gone to abuse or this or that, but we've recreated unhealthy things. And if you can't spot unhealthy things in your relationship, that's unhealthy.
Yeah.
And part of the maturing process of being in a relationship, a marriage, a long-term relationship, is understanding the shortcomings of the other person and loving them anyway. But there needs to be another side to it where you need to see what is poisonous. In other words, what can kill a relationship. If he has to have his way, if she needs to have it just so, and any changes from this is going to set her off.
Yeah.
Or the cycle that keeps on happening over and over and over again,
Do you think that, having learned this after Shauna started working here, do you recognize more in your different churches that you have been in? Are you able to recognize people that are in trouble without them actually coming to you or to Shauna? Are you more in tune to that? Yes
and no. Some things still catch you off guard. There was a woman once that wanted to join our marriage, and we had to get a restraining order against her. And her husband, it became her ex-husband, and he stayed on at the church, was one of the most faithful, diligent men, one of the most straightforward and honest guys that you'd ever meet. And, sometimes we have a phrase that we use is, sometimes people go sideways. You just don't know what started it, but something in him went sideways. Now, my wife can sometimes spot that out in a man and a woman's relationship quicker than I can. But there are times when I'm sitting in boardrooms and I'm going, oh no, all the signs are here. And it is one of those conversations that you force yourself to have, or you can hit it head on and confront it, or you can come at it sideways gently. And I'm more of a gentle guy. I'll try that first. But if the gentleman isn't getting what I'm saying, I'll have to, just put it out there full out. And it's amazing by the time it gets to putting it out there full out. I can't tell you of any time I was wrong, because being a Christ follower doesn't mean you're perfect. But when you meet people that will even try to hide things from God, that's some big warning signs. And so when I'm talking with people that are dealing with it. Number one, it's, I had a great pastor once, and I think there's enough time that maybe I could say it. We were in Oregon. I was the associate youth and whatever he wanted me to do guy. And we had a guy on our church board verbally abusing his wife. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. I mean, and on the outside, he was successful. He looked great. He worked out. He had kids. He would dote on and everything. But behind closed doors, he was, I don't even know. I'm trying to think of some words that I can use. Evil's the only thing I could think of. Because when you have a choice to do good and you choose not to, Scripture says that that's a fool. A person who knows what's right and won't do it, that's a fool. And that man was foolish, evilly foolish. And I remember watching my pastor sit down with both of them, and I'm sitting in the room as a accountability. Maybe also to tell him to duck if that guy threw a punch. But he looked right at his wife when as all this stuff was coming out, and I'm sitting here. My eyes are about big as saucer plates. We're maybe 20. We're just married, so it had to been about 27 years old. Sean was 24, and my pastor looks at the wife, and I've never heard a pastor say it. He looks at her and he goes, "Divorce is not the unpardonable sin, right?" And she, you could tell that was the first time anybody took her side. And then to watch my pastor cover her and protect her, I think that's a big reason why Sean and I maybe have been drawn into this, because we were led into it and shown a positive way of handling it from the church. And so that's why when we talked about being a partner, it was absolutely, it was a no-brainer for me, because that's part of what the church should be. It's the least of these. And in a relationship where you're supposed to have love and trust with one another, and you're afraid, or you're happy when they're asleep, or you're afraid until they get home of what kind of mood they're going to be in, and you don't know how to behave, or what tonight's going to look like. Is it going to look like this cycle? Is it going to look like that cycle? And will I have to behave like this in order to survive or get through, or I have to have the kids behave like this and do this, so that we don't have a blow up tonight, or because we had a blow up, he's going to come back with gifts tonight, and I don't know what to do, and I'm going to have to fake it. That's where I think the church needs to be available to, not to step in and take over, but to provide covering. And by covering, I mean encouragement, protection where we can, safety, or provide the opportunity to find a place of safety for them, to provide a place where they can get some help. The hard part is, again, it's this desire to want to return back to the issue. And with that, your heart breaks, because I wish I could say I've never seen anybody go back into it, but I've watched them.
Yeah.
Because, the only thing I can describe it as is, it's kind of like a full diaper. It may be stinky, but it's warm and it's mine.
Right.
And that's why I've seen people go back into things that are just...
Yeah. It's comfortable.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily like it, but to them, it's a comfort zone.
Right, because I know what to expect.
Yeah.
I might know that this will be bad for the next 2 days, but I know by the third or fourth day, I'm going to get hugged on and loved on, and all the right words are going to get said. And the problem with that is it's like going down a whirlpool, or eventually, or a tornado. Eventually, it's going to get so tight, it's going to rip you apart.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stay in those comfortable ranges of predictability. It gets worse and worse and worse eventually.
And we also need to recognize also that men are abused too.
Yes, and it's a difficult thing to have a conversation about it today, because there is a feminization of men, and there's also a pushback to that. Whether in the political stream or in schooling, whether it's in watching my relationships with my daughters with young men and how they think they're supposed to act, and then also watching the other side where they want to act in protectiveness, and it's not something that's going to go away for men or women. It's human nature that, we just talked about it earlier. It's human nature that when you can get away with something, you will. So whether you're female or male, if you can beat somebody down to get what you want, that's been going on for thousands of years.
Yeah, it has. And it's not going to just go away.
No, and that's why you need organizations like Highlands Help for Abused Spouses, but you also need pastors to be aware, to understand. And it's one of those things that I wish I could say I've seen in seminary and I've seen in Bible colleges, classes to understand abusive situations. We're told as pastors that we are mandatory reporters when it comes to child abuse. But when it comes to spousal abuse, we either try to correct it ourselves or we try to pray it away. And I'm not saying that prayer doesn't work. Prayer absolutely does work. But while God is working on people, we also have the responsibility to help where we can, and to offer help, and to offer counseling, and offer separation, and to offer retreat for those partners that can't defend themselves, and for their children. And a lot of the times I think that is what I've seen in church, is when it comes to the children picking up the same habits, is where you start to see the wife going making that, or that putting the foot down and actually leaving.
What brings me to the next question, and you kind of answered it in a way, is when you were going to college, was there anything that you have any courses whatsoever about domestic violence, how to spot, how to talk to victims? I would assume that you learned all about how to talk with your parishioners in all kinds of other different situations and stuff. But was there anything that they taught you?
Most of it was stories or anecdotes, and maybe we talked about it in one class setting, but it wasn't something that was as prevalent as it is. And this is the thing I think that most people don't understand. It's more prevalent than what you think, especially being a minister in a rural community, because the chances of being isolated and dominated by the husband who has all the finances and everything is great. But then I've also seen the other side of it, is because they're married and there was no prenup, half the farm's mine, and if you don't do what I say, I'm going to take it with me. Right. And so, so there is some of the passive aggressive going the other way, but it's more prevalent than what you know, and I wish they would have spent a little bit more time. I learned more about how to spot child abuse than spousal abuse. And I'll tell you this, if there's child abuse, there's usually spousal abuse.
That's right. That's right. So if you could get the schools to add courses, would this be one that you would say would be very beneficial to the church and to the pastors? Oh, you have this knowledge.
Yes, and see, being a pastor is a little bit of learning to be the jack of all trades, because you're learning to connect with people, You're learning to minister to people. You're going to find out you want to minister to those who are more like you or represent more like you. And you're going to find out that there are going to be people that don't want anything to do with you. And then in the midst of all this, you've got to learn how to apply scripture correctly, whether you have a denominational tendency. So you have some denominations that have gone to more of a social program than a biblical program. And I'm not going to get into the theology of all of that. There is a tendency still, whether you are socially aware or not, to avoid uncomfortable things. And let's be honest, this is a very uncomfortable thing.
Yes, it is.
Not only that, but it doesn't pay well. And I know I'm joking about it, but when you make yourself available, when I make my wife available, I know that there are going to be nights that she's getting up at 1, 2 to go be there when the police come, or to be available when that call comes in from a client because he's broken an order of protection and the police are there, and can you help me get my kids back to sleep? I have had to find more training outside of seminary and Bible college than what I find in it. That's something I think I wish they would have taught. Listen, where you go be involved in law enforcement, at least to learn how to handle counseling at wrecks, at deaths, or going with a police officer on that. Also, go and sit with certain schools and find out how to help with whatever they might need, but also look for the social need in other ways, like spousal abuse support. I know some people that will do divorce recovery. Some people will do grief counseling, and those are wonderful. But those are always after the fact. What we get to do, or what we can do when it comes to spousal abuse, is in the midst of. And everybody wants to be on the firefighting team, but nobody wants to necessarily go into a burning building.
Very well put. Yes, very well put.
So, in that sense, I know a lot. I went to school with some pastors that are pastoring huge churches, and I don't think that they probably will talk about this. They might have a pastor on their staff that deals with this, and that's great. But the larger the church, the more hidden problems can be. And the smaller churches are where we need it. And that's where, if I could do anything, I would go to the denominations in certain states or certain state units and make available those, would I say introductory training? Is that fair to say? So that they can spot some of these things. Because I'll tell you, we live in a sparsely populated state. And probably per capita, we probably have more issues of spousal abuse because it comes to the light. And a lot of the first places it shows up is the church.
Yeah, and it's still the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, yeah.
It's still the...
I mean, you could tell me the statistics. How many, for every one that a person is trying to get out of a relationship or seeks help for it, how many go unknown?
I would probably guess at that, because you can't track that, but I would guess that for every one, there's probably, 20 or 30 out there that...
Oh, gosh. I thought you were going to say 5 or 6.
No.
But see, that's just it. And not only that, but it also, I would say that dealing with this has been helpful in my pre-marriage counseling with couples. And sitting down with a couple, and I can think of one couple right now where I said, do not marry him. I will not perform this service. You should not marry this man. And she did anyway. And it went exactly textbook. He was military, and eventually then there were kids involved, and having to leave that abusive situation and have him follow and show up and all of the things that go with that. And, you know, just because I tell somebody something doesn't mean that I know I'm going to be right. But that one was one I just look back and I go, oh gosh,
Yeah.
you know, the children are wonderful. It's not the children that should suffer this, but it could have been avoided. And
It could have been, but again, love is blind.
well,
And-
yeah.
Um,
And sometimes stone cold deaf.
right. Yeah.
But I was talking with a coach once, and we were talking about a distance. I helped coach cross country at the high school, and we're talking about a difference. And I said, you know, just based on the times, I feel like, because I've been around, you know, the kids long enough, and I know how fast they can run. I said it's probably 250 meters is what this little stretch we're running over and over. And so we got this little map unit out, and it's 257 meters. Woo! You know, it was pretty close. You know, hearing you say that you think it's, you know, 15, 20 more or whatever more that it just blows my mind.
Yeah.
Because if we really believed that as pastors, we would be looking for it then. More so than, I mean, you're talking, it's right up there with families that are going to be dealing with financial issues.
Right. I know that you go to at least once a year, whatever,
Yep.
go to conferences.
Mm-hmm.
And do they do different trainings at these conferences, or is that not what the conferences are about?
You know, they have a more of a sociable one where you get together, and Montana winters are long, so they'll have one in January where you can just get together and visit with one another, which is good. That needs to happen with, it's a difficult, I don't want to say career, but maybe calling to walk through. But then we have a leadership conference, and where we do, business and other things once a year. And that's the one I wish we could get a foothold in, because it's still not understood how prevalent this is. The domestic violence is probably the one of the biggest issues a pastor will face in his church in a small congregation, small meaning under 70, 75 and under, 100 and under. And I know in my denomination, that's about, in Montana, that is about 70 churches, 80 churches. And if you are saying that there's 15 to 20 more than what has been seen in the light, then if they don't have it in their congregation, then they are dealing with people in the community that are definitely going through with it. And it's not that we just pastor our church, is that we make ourselves available to the whole community. And we will talk about things like homosexuality, which face maybe 2 to 6% of the population, but you're talking about something that maybe affects 30%.
Yeah, it's, for the many years that I've been doing this, which is going on 42 now, I've watched a lot of changes over the years. And we have, fought for a lot of different bills in the legislature. And what frustrates me more than anything is I watch everything go back downhill. Are fighting the same battles that we were fighting 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And they say, well, we've just got to have more laws. And I say maybe we should enforce the ones we have.
Yeah.
And maybe there should be more people trained. This is one of the most dangerous calls law enforcement goes on. Yet we have law enforcement agencies throughout this service area that we cover that have very, very little training in it. At the academy, I'm being told that they have 4 hours of training on domestic violence on, again, the most dangerous call that they go on.
Yeah.
And that frustrates me because it used to be at one time, they got a whole lot more than that.
Yeah.
And they still could have used more. So it's frustrating that I watch it go over here instead of over here, to where our numbers are going down.
Yeah.
Instead of going up or staying steady.
Yeah.
And so my next question would be, I believe you belong to a ministerial association.
Yeah, in our community, yes.
Is that a place where the pastors get together and visit and stuff? But is that a place where you can talk about this type of stuff?
It definitely has been a place where I've talked about it. It's almost like going to a triage doctor. And some of them think that you're talking about their patient's toenails being too long when you talk about this, rather than being the bloody wound that it is. And for some, they're just trying to survive themselves. Now, that's another thing that's kind of scary, is watching, pastors that I've known have dealt with this or deal with it in one way or another. And they don't even know how to handle it in their own lives, let alone in their churches. And because they see it as normal, well, that's just part of being married. You're always going to disagree or whatever. They can't even tell themselves the truth that this is unhealthy, this is unhelpful, and it isn't the example that we're supposed to be to our parishioners. And I'm the kind of guy that I'll admit my mistakes in front. I've told stories on myself, I think, more often than not. I mean, you've heard me before.
Yeah.
But getting it right in the home is the first place to start. And a lot of pastors are too busy. Well, it's like anything else. We're too busy doing it rather than being it. And it's got to be one of those practices of being. And in a rural area like this, where different denominations can place their pastors in and pull them out, the average stay for a pastor is only maybe 3 to 4 years, if that. I've just hit my 4.5 year anniversary, and I think 6 years is the longest I've been in one place. Now, that's before I matured, because I hear that maturity for men usually hits about 50. So I am just now hitting my maturity, and I'm now understanding how to handle certain relational things with other men in the church, and to talk about to them their relationship with their wives and how they treat them, or to talk with women and how they treat their husband and how they, publicly berate them or publicly shame them. It goes both ways. I've watched it, and I just kind of go, you pull the guy aside and say, "Hey, what's going on with this, man?" And they go, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, it's one thing to poke fun, but it's another thing to do what you just did. So how are things going?" And then you don't see them.
Yeah.
And it's maybe 6 months till you can catch a hold of them again, despite phone calls or anything else. And so this thing, it happens with pastors, and it happens with their people. And there are too many other little fires that demand our attention. There's that thing called the tyranny of the urgency. The urgent things, or the things we think are urgent, will always take care of the most important things. But most pastors aren't taught how to take care of the important things, even in their own lives. And so trying to get them to come and talk on this and be vulnerable on this is a very touchy thing, because their livelihood is at stake now, if it's them that struggles in it. And if you're saying 3 out of 10, I'm just, the average of 3 out of 10 marriages will struggle with this. And 50% of marriages in the United States end in divorce. I think it's something like 45 first-time marriages end in divorce, and then it gets higher after that. Then what you really have is you have a crisis of responsibility. And I'm not trying to throw other pastors under the bus, but I have talked with guys that as they've gotten older, they'll look back and go, "We were the most unhealthy person in our church." Our marriage was the most unhealthy thing. And until we got help, we didn't know how to get off that cycle of destruction with one another.
So, in closing, Eric, if there's something, what would you say to our audience as a pastor, as father, husband? What would your advice be to the people that are listening?
The ability to honestly self-evaluate is one of the rarest things that we see in people and humanity today. We don't have that ability in cultures, and we have a hard time of that within the micro cultures and in fractions and everything else. The ability to step back and to look at yourself and examine yourself. And I believe that this is what Jesus meant when he says, do not judge lest you be judged. In other words, if you will step back and examine yourself, then you're able to help others. But if you can't examine yourself, you won't be able to help others. That's the whole point of the log in your eye. You know, why do you say to your brother, you got something in your eye, let me help it out, when you've got this plank, this big old stick in your eye? First take the stick out of your eye, then you can help your brother. So for me, I would say that those listening, you need to evaluate. Are we healthy? Am I healthy? What am I afraid of by answering this question? If I'm unhealthy, does that mean my relationship is unsalvageable? Those are great questions.
Yeah.
And until we start asking tough, penetrating questions, we will continue to live what we've always lived, and we will continue to only know what we've only known. I can say this, that I watched my parents fight and bicker and argue, and then I saw that happening in my marriage with my wife. And we would do this and I realized at some point it was like, well, this is silly. Why am I picking on this? I can just let it go. I don't have to be right. I don't have to have my way. And then something began to happen when I began to look for my wife's happiness more than mine. I began to be more happy in my marriage. And I remember about year 16 in our marriage, I looked over Sean and I said, I never knew marriage could be this amazing. And it was an aha moment for me to understand that by just self-evaluating, I could help correct some of the things in my own relationship and come about with something better. And I will say, it didn't just happen with me. Sometimes I had coaching. Sometimes I had some really good older men and even some older pastor wives that said some very poignant things that caused me to think. And that is one of the things that I love to hear are those stories about it was going one way and then it became something completely different and better.
Well, thank you, Eric. I think that we hit on a lot of really, really important issues here and more that we could talk about. And I hope that we can again.
Definitely.
So thanks for being here. And this is Highlines Help, Breaking the Silence. Be safe, be happy, and love life.